Auch von meiner Seite nochmal ein herzliches Willkommen. Schön, dass wir in der Runde zusammen sind
thank
und wir
you
merken eben rund um das Thema
for
Bavaria,
having
die bislang die
come
Aspekte zu
together.
beleuchten,
It
zu
is
schauen, wo
interesting
stehen
to
wir,
know
warum ist
where
es
we
so
are
und wo will sich
and
das Ganze hin
where we are
entwickeln.
going.
EU-Seite,
We
Belgien
have
seitens Frankreich haben
received
wir
some
jetzt erste
input
Impulse
from
bekommen und
France.
wir wollen uns
In
jetzt in der
these
verbliebenen
3
knappen
quarters of an
Dreiviertelstunde
hour, we want
weiter
to
in die
go further
Projektregion
into the
vorarbeiten. Wir
project
sind ja
region.
mit dem
We are in
LIFEstockProtect
Germany, in
unterwegs hier
Bavaria,
in
with
Deutschland, in der
Livestock
Bayern,
Protect,
in Österreich und
and
in
also
Italien
in
sowie in
Austria
Südtirol.
and South Tyrol.
Und
And
es wird
we
so sein, dass wir
will
jetzt noch
welcome some
einige Gäste
additional
dazu begrüßen
guests.
dürfen.
First of all,
Das
this is
sind
Konrad
zunächst erstmal
Pfattner,
Konrad Pfattner,
Klaus
Klaus
Pogadl,
Pogadl und Florian
and
Thurnbauer, die uns jeweils von diesen Projektländern nochmal Einblicke geben werden. Und anschließend
Christian
gehen wir noch etwas
Bart
in eine
will give us some
Diskussion, wo
input
eben sowohl
from these
Vorredner
areas,
auch Herr
and
Christian
then there will
Barth
be a
dazu
discussion.
stoßen wird.
Well,
Ich würde jetzt
also
gerne anfangen
precisely with
wollen mit
Christian
der
Barth. I would
südlichsten
like to
Projektregion in
start with
Südtirol.
southernmost project
Konrad
region, which
Pfattner
is
als
South Tyrol.
stellvertretender
Konrad
Amtsdirektor beim
Pfattner
Amt für
is
Bergbaukeit wird uns
Deputy
jetzt einen
Director
Einblick
of the
geben,
Office
wie das
for Mountain
Fördergeschehen in
Management
Südtirol
and
geregelt
Farming, and he
ist,
will give us some
was da
input
vielleicht
about
Besonderheiten sind.
how the
Wir würden es jetzt
whole
so
thing is
machen, gerne,
organized
Gäste
in the
weiter
south of
Fragen
Tyrol.
stellen. Wir würden jetzt auch die ganzen
Questions
Impulsvorträge
can
probieren,
still
auch
be
gegeneinander
asked in the
wegschalten,
chat,
weil wir
but we
danach
want
dann ja die
to have the
Zweidiskussion
impulse
einsteigen. Ich werde
presentations
jetzt
one
direkt
after the other,
die
because
Bildschirmpräsentation
after that
freigeben
we
und dann
will
Herr Pfattner bitte.
go into the discussion.
Schönen guten Morgen in die ganze Runde.
Good morning.
Ja, das ist wunderbar.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. This is perfect. So I will try to show to you the framework conditions of livestock protection in South Tyrol, and I will try to be brief. We have been dealing since 2010 with the subject of the wolf. At the time, the first wolves were regularly confirmed to have been seen in the border region with Trentino. In 2015, a study was commissioned from Agridea in Switzerland, and it was about a feasibility study where approximately 30 small pastures in South Tyrol were checked for livestock protection measures and the possibility of the implementation. One of the results of this study was that there should be a central point of contact for the cattle farmers and so on, and the breeders, where they could get information. Since 2015, we have had this consulting unit. See, as far as the funds are concerned, well, they are financed from regional funds. I try to show them here schematically. There is the possibility to have pilot projects supported on livestock protection. It is carried out directly by the regional department of forestry and agriculture and mountain farming. So far, 10 projects have been supported at the rate of 350,000 euros. And this was more than anything about the building of infrastructures that are the prerequisite for the implementation of livestock protection areas. It was about grazing paddocks and fences, and well, it was also about the supply of the shepherds in refuges and the construction of such refuges. The second possibility was the applications by the applicants directly. So if there is a need for a new refuge for a shepherd or for a new stable, then they can address their application directly to us. Projects that are connected with livestock projects, livestock protection projects are very much prioritized. If they concern the refuges for shepherds, and the funding rate is 50 to 70% of recognized costs. And then it's also the erection of fences. The prerequisite is that at least there needs to be one livestock unit for 60 days on the pasture. We have this active since 2018. We started with 70% funding rates since 2020. However, that has been increased to 100%, and it is granted on standard costs per running meter of fence. So this includes the material costs for the purchase of the fence, but also the labor costs and transport costs for the fence and erection and installation costs. These costs are at the moment €8 per running meter of livestock protection fence. The maximum fundable fence length depends on the number of animals. It's maximum 5 running meters per small livestock and 10 running meters for cattle and for horses. So this has been active now for 5 years. The balance is not really that good. We have had approximately 40 applications. We received 40 applications, 30 payments have been made so far. This is approximately 30 kilometers of livestock protection fences and 217,000 euros in subsidies. Here we have shown the options for the future, and it also should highlight where we are rather bad. Where we are rather bad is the guard dogs. At the moment, well, we have no funds whatsoever for the purchase of the guard dogs or for their maintenance. At the moment, we have a first proposal. According to this first proposal, the use of guard dogs on the alpine pastures is to be funded, but not the purchase. So a flat rate contribution per season and dog would be conceivable. We know that from neighboring countries. One thing that still remains unanswered is the test of suitability of the guard dogs. At the moment, internally, we have no competencies and we don't have an infrastructure here. A second aspect is the constant or permanent herding with hounds, and we know that from Switzerland. Here the subsidies are actually tied to the herding input or herding labor. That depends, for example, on such things as whether there's free grazing, paddock grazing, or permanent herding. As we have heard before, the new GAP basically makes such measures possible, but our region did not activate such measures. Other measures that we have already seen in neighboring countries would be conceived now as well, but they have been adopted yet. One thing where we have to become active is that we are funding livestock protection fences only on alpine pastures, but not on greens. And also the GPS trackers for small livestock on alpine pastures should perhaps also be funded, but we haven't got to this yet. So that's it from me. Okay, so thank you very much for the South Tyrol situation. So we have heard that you concentrate on the alpine pastures and some ideas how that could be extended. Now we'll go a little bit further to the north. And Mr. Pogadl is at the office of the government of Salzburg, and he will explain to us the Austrian situation and also the wolf and lynx center. Well, he's acting there. He will explain to us the situation in Austria. I will just give him the floor.
Ja, grüß Gott, herzlichen Dank. Ich hoffe, ich bin verständlich.
So, thank you very much. I hope that I can be understood. My presentation will be in German, as you can also see. So, livestock protection measures in Austria. This is a very highly differentiated subject. Let's just go to slide number 1.
Dass ich die weitergeben kann, genau. Österreich ist geprägt durch die
So Austria has federal structures. This means that there are distributed competencies between the federal government and the regional governments. The main competencies for hunting and agriculture are with the provinces, so it depends very much on the provincial laws, and that means that these matters are handled differently in each province. Basically, we have hunting kind of laws. The large carnivores are largely protected, and if we talk about livestock protection, then we have also regionally different rules. Currently, livestock protection measures are only funded in 4 provinces. Lower Austria, for example, funds 50% of the net material costs for the renovation and equipping and construction of fences for sheep, goats, and calves. Then let's go to the province of Salzburg. They fund fence material up to 3,000 euros. GPS trackers are also funded, and also guard dogs are funded. Of course, we have the tourism, or at least the alleged tourism problem, which also extends to guard dogs. Anyway, the funds in Salzburg are well accepted. We are talking about more than 100,000 euros, especially fences are used near the farms. Of course, on alpine pastures, it is more difficult. As far as the guard dogs are concerned, we have to say that animal protection is under the federal laws. So the federal government is responsible here, and the use of guard dogs is very much difficult because the prerequisites are very tough. But anyway, something at least is available. Then let us go to the province of Tyrol. 60% of the purchasing costs of electric fences for sheep and goats are used, and for GPS trackers there is a 50% funding possibility. As far as Vorarlberg is concerned, we have a different rule because we have a basic subsidy for 20 to 100 sheep. It is a certain amount that will be available per year. Then there is also a subsidy for herding expenses if there's a concrete risk of wolves being in this area. So as far as the implementation of CAP is concerned, we are a little bit further than South Tyrol because a strategy plan has already been adopted and approved in September 2022. It includes subsidies with the intervention of animal welfare grazing and animal welfare herding. We support the species appropriate keeping of ruminants on pastures. In addition, the funds that are available for livestock protection through dogs are granted on top of the area coupled subsidies. So at the first RGVE, we have a unit of 25 euros for cattle unit. So as far as dairy cows are concerned, there are subsidies for additional work at a rate of 140 euros per unit. And also we have an optional surcharge for the use of certified dogs of up to 700 euros. So this is the summary. This is the summary. We also had the problem with suitability tests, just like South Tyrol. What we did do is that we have an e-pool fund, and the dogs must be certified by an Austria center. So there is a national kind of center that certifies the dogs being suitable for the for herding. So I would also like to make reference to our homepage where you can find further information. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for this comprehensive but short overview of the situation in Austria. We also see that we have one country and that there are many different approaches because of federal structure. Now we turn to Bavaria, and Florian Thurnbauer comes from the Department of Crop Production, Organic Farming and Mountain Farming, and he will give us an insight into the German situation, in particular, obviously, the Bavarian situation.
Anmerkung, Herr Mendel, könnten Sie Ihr Mikrofon noch ausschalten während dem anderen Vortrag?
Mr. Mendel, could you switch off your microphone, please?
Dankeschön.
Gut, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to show to you the livestock protection subsidies in Bavaria. I only look at investive funds here. In Bavaria, since May 2020, we have been funding investments in livestock protection. There are two areas: the guideline issuer and the ministry that provides the money comes from the environmental administration, and we from agricultural ministry are responsible for the handling of the subsidies. Financing comes from the land only and from the subsection nature conservation only, and there is no subsidies for maintenance, for ongoing maintenance costs. There are investment subsidies, as I have said, but there's also compensation rules for depredation losses, in other words, for kills. So who receives subsidies? That's, for instance, agricultural companies and enterprises that keep grazing animals, and hobby animal keepers if they keep grazing animals. What do we subsidize? Well, mobile fences, permanent fences, also retrofitting of permanent fences and mobile stables, and additional livestock protection measures. And we also subsidize livestock guard dogs with accessories.
Und es wird nicht überall gefördert, sondern nur
We do
in
not
einer
provide
sogenannten
subsidies
Förderkulisse.
everywhere. We
Wir
just
haben davon
provide
zwei.
funding
Eine
in a
Förderkulisse
so-called
für
funding
Zäune
framework or area. We have
und
two of
eine
them.
Förderkulisse
One
für
funding framework is for
Herdenschutzhunde.
fences and one
Die
funding
Förderkulisse
framework
für
is
Zäune
for
richtet sich
guard
hauptsächlich nach
dogs.
den
The funding framework
auf,
for
wo halt
fences
Wölfe standorttreu sind oder akut
really
Risse
concerns
vorkommen.
areas where there
Momentan
have been
haben wir
killed or
circa ein
where
Drittel der Landesfläche
wolves
ist
are
in dieser
known to be
Förderkulisse für Zäune,
sedentary.
wo
So
eben
1/3 is in the funding framework
Landwirte
fence, and
Antrag stellen
here
können.
the
Wenn
farmers can file
ein
applications.
Wolf
And
spontan
if
auftritt,
a
also
wolf appears
ein Durchwanderer zum
spontaneously,
Beispiel,
for
und
instance, a
er
migratory wolf, and
reißt
if that
50
migratory
Tiere, dann
wolf
wird ad
kills
hoc eine neue
livestock,
Förderkulisse
then
um
a
den
new
Fundort
funding
des
framework
Risses
is created
ausgeweitet.
around the location of the kill,
Wir fördern also
the killer
fast
scene, so
alle
to speak. So
landwirtschaftlichen Nutztiere,
we
also mit
provide
Ausnahme
subsidies for
der
almost all agricultural farming
der
animals,
Kühe
with the exception
und
of
der
cows
erwachsenen Rinder fördern wir
and
alle
adult
Tierarten, also von
cattle. We
Zuchtziege
provide funds for
über
all
Jungrinder,
kinds of animals.
Pferde,
This includes sheep and
als auch
goats,
neue
young
Ackerbesiedlung
horses,
bis zu den Schweinen
also
im Freien.
calves, and also pigs kept in the open.
Und zu den Förderhöhen,
As far as the amount of the
wenn
subsidies is
ein
concerned,
Landwirt einen Antrag
if
stellt mit mehr
an
als 5.000 Euro
if a farmer
Nettoinvestitionsvolumen, dann sind drei
asks for a
Angebote
subsidy of more than
beizubringen
5,000 euros net
und
investment
wir
amount,
fördern
then he has to ask for
entweder
3
also in Höhe
offers,
des
and
günstigsten
we
Angebotes,
either
aber maximal
fund the
bis
cheapest
zu
offer,
einem
but
sogenannten
certainly no
Referenzkostensystem.
more
Also
than
das
the
sind
reference
im
cost
Endeffekt
value.
Förderobergrenzen
Ultimately,
für
these
den
are
laufenden
caps
Meter Zaun.
for
Das sind bei
subsidies for the
den
running meter.
Elektrozaunnetzen je
In the
nach
case of
Höhe
electric
zwischen 3,80
fences,
und
depending
4,60
on the
pro
height,
laufenden
this is
Meter.
between
Das ist die
380 and
Obergrenze. Bei den
460. This is
Elektrolytzenzäunen,
the
die auch mobil
upper limit.
sind,
This is the
fördern wir
cap.
3,50
Then
Euro.
for electric strand
Bei
fences,
der
we
Neuerrichtung von
provide
Netzzäunen sind es 13
350
Euro pro
euros.
Kubikmeter.
And for
Hier
new
ist
construction of
ein
electrified
Teil der
permanent
Montage
fencing, we
inklusive.
provide 13 euros. Part of
Und
the assembly or
wenn
the installation is
die Errichtung
included.
von Zäunen
And
ist
if the
natürlich
installation of, well, the installation of fences is
aufwendiger
much
und
more
teurer als im
expensive in the
Flachland.
mountains
Deswegen
than
fördern wir
in the
in der
lowlands. So
Berggebietskulisse bis
in
zu 18
the
Euro.
mountains, in the highlands, we
Wenn ein bestehender
can
Zaun
give out
nachgerüstet
subsidies
wird,
of up to
dann
18 euros. If an
gewähren
existing
wir
fence is
von
retrofitted,
diesen
we
Referenzwerten maximal
grant a maximum
60%
of
für die
60% of the
Genauauslastung.
reference values.
Die Anschaffung eines Herdenschutzhundes wird
The
also
purchase
mit
of a
3.000
guard
Euro,
dog
das sind
is
alles
subsidized at a rate of
Nettokosten,
3,000 euros. These are all net
gefördert und
costs,
plus
by the
Zubehör.
way. Plus
Und
also, so the guard
bei
dog plus
Privatpersonen
accessories.
und
As far as
klausulierenden
private
Betrieben
persons and flat
wird
rating
also
enterprises are
zusätzlich auch die
concerned,
Mehrwertsteuer gefördert.
the value added tax is also
Das wäre es in
granted
aller Kürze
as a
bei
payment.
einem Blick
This
von der
was
Südspitze.
the overview, and here you can see Mount Zugspitze on this photograph.
Wunderbar und vielen Dank.
Okay, wonderful, and thank you very much. Now we have different impressions. Now
von dem EU-Blick außerhalb der
we
Projektregion
have
und
looked
vor
at
allem durch
the
Region gearbeitet.
EU level,
Ich
we
würde
looked
jetzt gerne mit
then at
euch
the
nochmal
project
in die
region.
Diskussion, in den
And I would
Austausch
like to
starten.
have a discussion with you
Dazu
now,
hatte ich, wie
an
angekündigt,
exchange
gesagt,
of
dass Herr
opinion.
Barth dabei
I
ist,
said that
beziehungsweise
Mr.
mir wurde gerade gesagt,
Barth
dass
will be
dort
there,
noch ein
but I
anderer
was
wichtiger Termin
told
ist, in den er gleich
that there's an
wechseln muss.
important
Aber
date
Herr
into which he
Dr.
will have to change
Settles,
very
ich hoffe, das ist so
quickly, but
richtig
Dr.
ausgesprochen,
Settles
Umweltministerium ebenfalls
from
dabei
the
ist.
Federal
Und
Ministry
würde
is
dazu
also
gleich
here.
gerne mit einer
And
ersten Frage
I
aus
would like to
dem
start the
Q&A
first question
starten,
from the
nämlich
Q&A.
von Frau Rippel.
It comes from Ms. Ripple.
Es wurde hier gerade ausgeführt, dass in
It has been said
Bayern zwei
that in
Förderkulissen
Bavaria you
bestehen,
have
einmal Zaun,
two
einmal
funding
Protektion,
frameworks. One
dass
is
beide aber nicht
fence and one
flächendeckend
is guard
vorhanden
dog,
sind.
but
Und wenn man
both
sich aber eben
or
die
neither of them
Gesamtentwicklung auch in anderen
has
Bundesländern in
blanket
Deutschland anguckt,
coverage.
ist ja
If we
damit zu
look at
rechnen, dass die
other
auch
länder, then it is to be feared the wolf will spread there as well. But it is in all our interest that we do prevention rather than depredation compensation. So the wolf should not start going into the herds. And what is the current status there? In how far is compensation to be extended to include prevention measures, or what? What is the plan here? Well, I answer on behalf of Dr. Barth because he had to leave at 10:30 and it's already 10:31. So he might have left. So at the moment, it is not planned to change the funding frameworks. If we do them, we have to take into account many factors, which is the availability of budgets, for example, and there's also the finance ministry. It has to approve the subsidies, and we have the court of auditors. So the auditing court or the court of auditors says that we have to focus our subsidies on areas that are necessary. You can say that all of Bavaria, well, it's necessary in all of Bavaria, but because of budgetary constraints, we also applied for EU funds. As far as the extension of the funding frameworks are concerned, we're very generous. If the wolf kills an animal, then 10 kilometers around the killer scene, you have a new funding framework. In May 2020, until now, we have spent 10.1 million euros for approximately 10,000 companies or farms. And if you had all of Bavaria, then it would be 30 million. And well, we spend quite a lot of money, taxpayers' money, and the fact that we provide 100% funding for fences, for example, is massive, and therefore we can't extend the framework, the funding framework to all of Bavaria. Okay, so we have a species which is to be protected and livestock that is to be protected, but differentiation is sometimes difficult to understand for animal keepers. Perhaps you can say something about South Tyrol, and here we, well, in South Tyrol we don't have sub-frameworks, but nevertheless, you do have it through the back door because you differentiate between lowland pastures and alpine pastures. So I would like to know what you have here. So prioritization was from the beginning that we would concentrate on alpine pastures because the study of the Swiss Institute concentrated on alpine pastures. So that's why we concentrated on small cattle farming enterprises at height. Things changed. The Swiss study said that we would get problems with sheep pastures. Also, there is kind of kills in the winter, so a lot of things are being discussed. And some criteria will be ending at the end of the year, and we want to improve them as we face in the new rules. But anyway, it will involve critical decisions. Right. Did you want to know? Yeah, I just want to say about the availability of funds, especially in this context. Many people do not understand why the CAP money is not used in Germany. And in particular in Bavaria, we have many farmers that do livestock protection and who have expenses for cutting through fences. They really say that we are at the limit. We do not know for how long we will be able to continue to do livestock protection. And the question, I mean, well, you will have heard Mr. Grosjean, and France spends and has to spend a lot of money in order to keep the high number of wolf population in check. My question now is provocative. Will we wait until we have as many wolves as in France until we tap these funds, or shall we be more predictive and forecasting? Well, I have to say something. First of all, it is not that we don't use CAP. There are special funds that are exclusively for that are not exclusive for protection against the wolves. They are available for the agricultural area, and whatever we can get, we do utilize. We do that also as part of the nature conservation programs. In any case, we do use the funds, and if you distributed these EU funds to various areas, then you would have a certain scattergun effect. But we focus on that. But ultimately, we say that for livestock protection, we use Bavarian funds. So basically, really ultimately depends on which pocket it comes from, but people often say that we don't take advantage of EU funds. This is not true. We just put them in one pocket, and then perhaps we take something from another pocket for certain funding project. In Germany, we have cattle protection areas. It's a small amount, it's 38,000 in Bavaria, and we don't want to leave any of this behind either.
Gestern gehört, also die
We want to use it all.
dieser Förderung. Und
yes, but we have heard yesterday that there's a conflict between species conservation and preservation of raising animals on outside pastures. This is precisely the conflict. But if we hear
Anträge mehrere Monate liegen,
that
dann eben vorher auch schon Arbeit
funds
Landwirtinnen gelaufen ist im Sinne von mehreren
are lying around
einholen,
and
Gedanken zu machen und
without being used, or that farmers obtain offers and then they only get a small share, a small part, a small percentage of the offer funded. That, for instance, of a fence, they might get only 15%. Then basically the situation is that there's that the application takes a lot of effort. But what about the signals that you send out to pasture animal keepers? And in how far do you send out the signal that what it's all about is the conservation of outdoor grazing of grazing animals? Well, of course, that's what it's about. What else should it be about? I think it's a bit strange that everybody's moaning. The applications are usually, you know, like we give 100%. No other land gives out as much, 10.1 million in 2.5 years. And, well, you can't just throw about money with both hands and then, you know, see what happens. Until the budget runs dry, basically there are application prerequisites. People file in or hand in an application, then that is looked at, then it is approved. Then, of course, it takes some time until the fence is built. And then, of course, another thing is that obviously they have to build the fence first and then they get the money afterwards. Of course, they have to do something beforehand, but you know, if you spend state money, if you spend taxpayers' money, then you have to have some checks. You have to have some kind of, you know, you have to have control. I mean, this is a voluntary kind of funding by the state, you know, like we are not really as such kind of forced to do it. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit upset today because everybody's moaning and everybody's saying this is all red tape and stuff like that. Okay, well, on both sides, we want an awareness of the difficulties that exist. And I think it is very important for each side to understand the other. Okay, you're right, of course.
Well, I would like to make a comment. What Bavaria does is in comparison, I mean, we've just seen that in comparison to South Tyrol, Austria is huge. So thank you, or my respect. Subsidies go up immensely because for so many years we kept our eyes closed of what we were going to face. And of course, now the pressure is a lot higher. My question, though, is a thing about something that we keep hearing, this type of subsidies for agriculture. We did this for one species. After all, that's a major problem for us because if we subsidize or fund livestock protection measures such as hurdles or targeted grazing, then we don't do that to protect the wolves, but also our sheep. We protect them from all other types of dangers that can happen to them up there. So it is an investment into animal welfare. And if then I hear that we have not invested as much in any other species compared to this one, then this has the result that people who are in favor of livestock protection are presented as wolf protectors, which makes the discussion a lot more difficult. So I am calling on everyone to identify the funding measures as what they are, an investment into agriculture, sustainable agriculture with a high degree of animal welfare, no matter who threatens them and who endangers them. This can also be straying dogs. It's not necessarily only a wolf.
Ich glaube, das kann man fast als Statement erstmal so stehen lassen.
I think that's a statement that we can just let there. Just leave there. Uwe Friedl. Thank you, Mr. Settles, for your honest answers. And if I may say so, I'm happy if the authorities' representatives are not only diplomatic, but make clear statements, because we want to talk to each other and be clear about it. So thank you for that. I have a question now. Everyone who presented, or at least to me, it seemed that the funding schemes are very different. In one country, there's funding for this, and the next one for that, and in Bavaria for everything. It seems that it's a bit of a patchwork in the Alpine area. At the same time, if I understood correctly, political decision makers are now trying to install Alpine-wide cross-border monitoring and cross-border management. So that's my question now about cross-border wolf management. Harmonizing livestock protection measures would be part of it. Are there working groups in place already? Are there discussions already to ensure that there will be framework conditions in terms of cross-border wolf management and herd protection measures?
Wenn ich da vielleicht für Österreich antworten darf.
If I may answer for Austria, at the moment we are very much focusing on harmonization at national level. At the moment we are several steps away from international harmonization. If we look at monitoring, for example, DNA monitoring, we finally managed that Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic are harmonized, but we are still not. We're still far away from harmonizing with Italy, Switzerland, and Slovenia, for example.
Vielleicht ein bisschen aus dem ganz konkreten Fördergeschehen für Einzelmaßnahmen muss noch mal rausheben und etwas in Richtung.
Perhaps we'll leave the terrain of funding for individual measures. Let's look at consulting. What I had the impression from yesterday, from the practitioners' answers, and perhaps this relates to what Mr. Settle said, the perception is that there are activities, but it kind of seems to be still difficult, A, to understand the programs, B, to be supported when someone applies, and what kind of consulting is needed. What we heard was that people felt alone, that they felt that there was a lack of clearly defined service provisions. And this is my question to the three countries, from the south to the north, if you like. How do you manage the interaction between the bureaucratic act of handing out funding and consulting of individuals or farmers? How do you establish networks? Are you planning on using any of the subsidies for consulting, for example? Mr. Pfattner, perhaps you would like to start. We at our Office for Mountain Economy are probably at an advantage. The job here, the post here, is not a full-time position, but what we do here is that we do a lot of consulting for mountain pastures, and livestock protection probably accounts for 10% of 3 people. The workload for livestock protection consultations. And since we're active in this area anyway, we often have we generally have direct contact to the people managing the alpine pastures or who are small-scale breeders. I don't really see that obstacle, but that obstacle to entering contact with the authorities is quite a low threshold. The big problem that I see is that we cannot offer them what they wish for. Okay, wonderful. What about Austria?
Die Prävention durch eine gemeinsame Schulung der Präventionsberater für ganz Österreich.
We have prevention, and we've leveled, or we give the same prevention training for prevention consultations in Austria. Like they all receive the same kind of training. If we talk about the specific states,
durch die Präventionsberater informiert.
The prevention consultants will then receive regional specific information and then pass it on. So is this an active offer of consultation for animal owners or keepers? Yes, of course. These provisions can be used. The threshold is very low. People can call us or send us an email. The prevention consultants are often sitting in the offices of the regional government, also in the chambers for agriculture, and they are at people's disposal free of charge. Let's look to Bavaria. Mr. Thurnbauer, Mr. Settle, would you like to answer?
Würde ich gerne antworten.
Well, I will answer then. In Bavaria, the case is the following. If a farmer wants a subsidy or consultation, he or she goes to the local office for agriculture, and in every office there is at least one person assigned with the task to provide consultation in terms of livestock protection, and the same person also gives out information on the subsidies and funding of livestock protection measures. So it's all in the same hand, so to say. However, if the questions are more specific or if it's a difficult case, for example, a shepherd who has areas that are hard to fence in, or gamekeepers, then we have expert consultants who are working at cross-regional level. They can also be contacted. They also go to the farms and then provide assessment, provide consultation if there are special needs in terms of livestock protection. There is a big response. A lot of people use these offers.
Und die Rückmeldung aus der
And
Praxis
we thought that it was a good idea to have the information all in one hand or from the same person. And the response was very positive.
Es schießt hier in alle Richtungen.
I see that there are a lot of responses and questions, both in the chat and also in the Q&A. Let's see what I find here. What I did see was something that was highlighted yesterday. Horses. There seemed to be a perception that subsidies were quite low, not much funding for horses, and it was hard to say in what cases the protection of horses could be subsidized. Perhaps someone can help me to find the question.
Gwen, möchtest du die Frage von der Sabine Ostfalk?
Genau.
Is this Sabine Ostfalk's question? I'll read it out. I'm quoting.
Günstigsten Angebot, gut 6.000
The best offer was 6,000 euro for about 2 kilometers of fence, but I only got approved 1,200 euro. No additional costs that would have been really necessary due to unevenness of the terrain. One pasture was not accepted because I was told that at the edge of a village there can be no funding for fencing. And there was an exclusion of plant-dotted mesh.
Das ist jetzt sicherlich ein Einzelfall, aber
that's surely an individual case, but could you help us make this more transparent? Why or how the decisions are taken on funding? Yes, if I may provide an answer. I don't know this individual case, of course, and it's tricky to talk about an individual case with 134 participants here, but generally, when we speak of horses, we can only fund the retrofitting of an existing fixed fence. And that's only one part. And if this existing fence is in such a dire condition that it cannot be retrofitted, then it will have to be built again. But here we fund only a maximum of 60% of the 13 euro for a fixed fence. So this is the only thing we can grant. And the fence that you mentioned before with the knotted fence with natural materials, this is not something that is eligible for horses at all. So what we do see here, funding is a complex business. It's a complex issue with a lot that has to be considered. Perhaps we will allow Max to speak one more time and then one more question from the chat. I have one quick question. A lot was said about the technical side of livestock protection. And in France, we heard that there are 530 shepherds financed up to 80%. And particularly in the alpine space where we talk about pastures that can be fenced in or not, and I think we'll hear about that later. The most important livestock protection is provided by shepherds. And in the past 20, 30 years, we have lost a lot of shepherds. Do you think that there is a chance for our discussion to go towards funding of shepherds?
Genau, da würde ich auch anknüpfen wollen, Max, weil genau das, was ich sozusagen als Abschluss hatte, genau in die Richtung reingeht. Nämlich,
yes, Max, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Mr. Gees said something similar about the combination of nature conservation and herd protection can be done by shepherds or by having shepherds. And targeted grazing can be a plus for both sides. herds that have a shepherd are a plus for nature conservation and landscape conservation. And it's also something that agriculture demands.
Anhand der Fragen von Max Rosberg und Carsten Geest würde ich total spannend finden.
So it would be really interesting to hear something about shepherds, the role of the shepherds, and from the north to the south, if you like. The north, that's probably me. In this case, Bavaria is the north, that's correct.
Das ist für uns als Südbayern ungewöhnlich, dass wir der Norden sind.
Feels funny in the south of Bavaria to beat the north.
Bewirtung,
Well,
also wir haben in unserem Managementplan für Wölfe
in terms of shepherd, in our management plans, step 5, we have the Bavarian Action Plan Wolf, and there we have established what is basic protection, and basic protection in fixed wolf areas after 1 year, the granting of a compensation.
Bewirtung tagsüber.
Basic protection is a shepherd during the day in combination with locking them in a pen or a stable overnight, them meaning the animals. You can't have a shepherd during the day and then leaving the animals alone at night, then of course you don't even need the shepherd during the day, because then the wolf will come and get the animals at night. If there is no opportunity to have them in a pen or in the stable overnight, day shepherd is also not really something that will be very helpful overall. And when we designed the funding scheme, we asked agriculture, what do we need in Bavaria in order to provide livestock protection? And since since there are hardly any shepherds in Bavaria, or it's not a traditional element of shepherds in the mountain pastures, it has not been part of the funding scheme so far. And I do think that funding shepherds will be very complex and complicated, because there are so many things to consider. For example, whether there is an opportunity to keep the animals locked in at night, for example, in stables. The thing is that in the mountain pastures, there won't be enough stables or pens. And when there are steep areas, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to build a night pen. And all of these conditions would need to be linked to the funding of shepherds, because they need to make sense after all. And the funding of fences and other livestock protection measures. Well, I think we did look at fences and other measures, but not yet at shepherds. So it seems to be complex, and perhaps in some areas there are limits of using shepherds. Perhaps you could say something from Austria, particularly in terms of shepherds. As we said before, at national level, we use ÖPUL funds from the Austrian Agri-Environment Program. It was just approved in September. The CAP strategy was just approved, and it will be enforced in 2023. I guess that the payment for shepherds will continue to be accepted, because there have been already. In terms of the guard dogs, we don't know yet. We don't know what the development will be. And I'd like to contradict my previous speaker. I think that I'm pretty sure that shepherds were a tradition in the Alpine region. Until the 1970s, there were many shepherds who spent time with the cattle in the mountains, but then they stopped being around simply because of economic reasons. In the province of Vorarlberg, we have one focus with shepherds. We work more with shepherds, but that's more an exception compared to the other regions in Austria. I know we've heard from South Tyrol, but would you tell us what the state of the discussion is in terms of shepherds in South Tyrol?
Ganz klar, außer Frage ist die.
It's no question at all whether shepherds make sense. They are the most important measure on alpine pastures, having shepherds with the herd, locking the herd in during the night. The big problem that we have here is that when is having a shepherd acceptable? We are talking about 1,400 mountain pastures, only very few that have animals of 300 to 400 small livestock units. This is where we could perhaps allow permanent shepherds, but everything that's below that is very difficult. At the moment, there is no funding for permanent shepherds.
Alles klar.
Okay.
Also, wie können wir das Ganze
Well,
zusammenfassen? Wir können an
how
der Stelle
can we make a
zusammenfassen,
summary? What we can say
dass
today and here
Herdenschutz eine
is that
Herausforderung im
livestock
Prinzip für alle
protection
ist.
is
Und
a
zwar
challenge
auch
for
für die Tierhalter
everyone,
auf der einen
for the
Seite,
animal
weil es
keepers on the
eben
one hand,
neue Herausforderungen
because the
für die
challenges
Tierhalter
are
bringt,
new
neue Maßnahmen nötig sind, die eben
for animal
sowohl
husbandry that
materiell
require
als auch
new interventions,
arbeitstechnischen,
both
teilweise
at material
extremen
level,
hohen Aufwand
also
haben.
at labor
Wir
level. There
sehen
is a
von der
lot of
anderen Seite her,
effort
es
put
gibt
into the labor.
verschiedenste
From the
Möglichkeiten,
other
Subventionen
side, we
zu
see that
stellen,
there are many options to
die auch durchaus
provide
genutzt werden,
funding.
aber wir haben eben auch
And
ganz
some
klar
of them
wahrgenommen, dass
are
auf Seiten der
used, and
Entscheider
we have also
Themen
seen
wie
that on the side
Nachvollziehbarkeit,
of
die einfach
the
die nötige
decision makers,
Bürokratie
there
und auch
is a
die
deal
Höhe
of
und zur Verfügung
bureaucracy.
stehenden Mittel in
There
einer
are
solchen
certain
Verteilung
criteria that need to be
schwierig
observed,
sind,
and it is
lange Prozesse
difficult
einfach
to
brauchen. Und
allocate the funds in a
ich denke
just and
wirklich,
fair
dass was
way.
wir
And these
festgestellt haben,
processes
der
are difficult,
Dialog.
take time.
Einmal seitens
What
der
we have seen
Tierhalter,
here
dort
is that
immer
what we
wieder
need is
anzumachen,
dialogue.
klarzumachen,
On,
wo
on the one
werden
hand, the
Probleme
animal
festgestellt und nicht
keepers
den Kopf in den
need
Sand zu stecken und zu sagen, das
to
wird sich schon
speak up,
erledigen oder auch nur mit den
not
Nachbarn drüber
ignore the
zu
issue and not
reden
and
und sich
only
zu
talk to the
beschweren, sondern
neighbor
es
and to
eben
complain to the
mitgedenkte
neighbor,
Kritik auch
but
durchaus an
to
die Verbände und letztendlich
also
an die regionale
send
Politik zu gehen,
well-defined
aber dass
criticism
es genauso auch
to
nötig ist,
the
dass eben von den
authorities
Behörden
or
die
to
Prozesse
associations or to the
möglichst transparent
chambers.
dargestellt werden können,
And
dass
the
sie verstanden
authorities,
werden
I
kann,
think, need
dass
to
die Tierhalter sich darauf
show
einlassen können und
transparency in
eben
terms of
ihren
their
bestmöglichen
processes, to
Nutzen
make the
aus den
processes
Verhandlungsfördermitteln
comprehensible,
ziehen können.
and to
Ich
make
glaube, so
sure
kann man das
that
ganz
the
gut
existing
zusammenbringen. Es ist
funds
für alle
can
ein
be
weiter Weg. Es
allocated
ist vor allen
to
Dingen
the
ein
people
Ziel,
who need them. I think the way ahead of us is still long. There's still a lot of learning to do as the wolf extends its territory. But there is one thing that should unite us and connect us, and this is maintaining and supporting animals grazing on pastures. This type of animal husbandry is something that we want to keep and maintain, and livestock protection measures are something that we need to be able to continue with it. Now I would like to give the floor to Martin. Thank you very much for the fantastic discussion. I can see that there are a lot of questions still in the chat, in the Q&A section. The interaction was great, and thank you to everyone who participated so eagerly.